You would think having endless piles of cash and a famous last name would guarantee a quick real estate sale, but apparently the market does not care who you are. We are looking at 30 abandoned celebrity compounds that are literally rotting into the ground, sitting on the market for years, even after the price tags were slashed to practically zero. These are not just houses, they were massive status symbols of ultimate power, luxury and success that are now completely unwanted, ignored and left to the mercy of Mother Nature. It begs the question, why is nobody buying these places? Is it bad feng shui? Terrible locations, or could there be something much darker lurking behind these gates? Buckle up as we dive deep into the scandalous and shocking truth behind these unsellable celebrity money pits. Do not go anywhere because the fate of these homes is absolutely unbelievable. Let's talk about Liza Minnelli. Her childhood estate in Beverly Hills was once the crown jewel of Hollywood's golden age, a place where legends walked. Today it stands as a creepy, haunting shell of a vanished era. This estate used to be bursting with music, laughter and parties, serving as the heartbeat of her family's legacy. The hallways were once lined with gold and velvet, hosting the most exclusive A-list gatherings that defined high society elegance back in the day. But here is where it gets tragic. After Minnelli's stepmother passed away, the property was seemingly abandoned, left without any maintenance or love for years. It started crumbling into a total ruin with cracks tearing through the walls, windows shattered, and that old school glamour slowly being eaten away by rot and neglect. It got so bad that urban explorers and random YouTubers started trespassing just to film the eerie decay of what used to be a palace. What was once a sparkling icon of entertainment history has turned into a forgotten artifact, a sad and poignant warning sign to the rich and famous. It shows that even the most treasured properties can turn into garbage. Despite its massive historical value, absolutely zero serious buyers have stepped up to the plate. No one wants to touch the restoration project, leaving this Hollywood gem in a total state of limbo. Now let's move on to the enigmatic Johnny Depp. Hidden away in the French countryside near Saint-Tropez, Johnny Depp's abandoned estate is just as eccentric and wild as the actor himself. Calling this place a mansion is an insult. This 30-acre property is literally a fully renovated private village, a hamlet, all to itself. We are talking about genuine stone cottages, a private church, a fully functioning restaurant, and even a town square for when you want to play mayor. Depp poured millions and his specific artistic soul into this place, building a fantasy world that looks like it was ripped straight out of a movie set. But despite looking like a fairy tale, this place has been a nightmare to sell. It has been sitting there struggling to find anyone willing to take the keys. Between his well-publicised financial hits and messy legal battles, Depp had to try and offload his beloved hideaway to recoup some cash. He listed it for a massive fortune, but the sheer size of the place, again, it is an entire village, scared off almost every wealthy investor. The maintenance costs alone for an estate this unconventional are terrifying, and even after slashing the price multiple times, the deal is dead in the water. So for the moment, Depp's whimsical bohemian sanctuary remains a ghost town, waiting for someone crazy enough to handle its weird charm. And the massive upkeep bills. Now look at Burt Reynolds. His Florida ranch was once the ultimate flex of Hollywood splendor, but now it is just a sad monument to a fading star. Sprawled across a massive plot of land, this estate was the physical embodiment of Reynolds' macho, bold personality, complete with horse stables. It had a private movie theatre and luxury guest houses where the biggest stars of the 70s and 80s used to party until dawn. Back in its prime, this ranch was not just a house. It was a sanctuary for the icon, giving him a quiet place to hide away from the insane pressure of being a superstar. But as Reynolds' finances started to crash and burn, the condition of this beloved property went down with him. Crushing debt forced him to put it on the market, but it sat there for years because nobody wanted to pay what he thought it was worth. The mansion sat in real estate purgatory, becoming a shadow of its former self before finally selling for pennies on the dollar compared to its original value. Even though new owners have taken over, the ghost of Reynolds still hangs over the place, serving as a bitter reminder of the final difficult chapter of a true Hollywood legend. Then there is Iron Mike Tyson. Few homes tell the story of rising to the top and crashing to the bottom quite like this. We are looking at Mike Tyson's massive Ohio mansion. When he was the undisputed king of the ring, this place was the ultimate symbol of his cash flow. It was decked out with a private nightclub, a full indoor basketball court, and multiple swimming pools, not to mention the tiger cages. It was the ultimate party playground for a champion who spent money as aggressively and ferociously as he knocked people out. But when Tyson's career hit the rocks and his bank account dried up, his grip on this lavish lifestyle slipped away fast. A whirlwind of legal drama and bankruptcy forced him to walk away, leaving this massive structure to rot in the middle of nowhere. For years, it stood completely empty and creepy, with the gold-plated interiors getting covered in thick dust and falling apart. It became a haunting monument to Tyson's turbulent life. Urban explorers would sneak in to wander the deserted halls. They documented the leftovers of a life lived in total excess, but in a twist that nobody saw coming, the property was actually saved. A local church group bought the mansion and completely flipped it, converting the party palace into a legitimate place of worship. The sanctuary where sin and indulgence once ruled is now home to faith and community, which is honestly incredible. It is a poetic and totally unexpected redemption arc for Tyson's former palace. But would you risk your savings to own a luxury mansion for just $2? Type the number 2 in the comments if you are brave enough, and keep watching as we uncover the dark secrets and scary reasons why nobody dares to touch these next homes. Cher is up next. Perched dangerously on the cliffs of Malibu, her Renaissance-inspired mansion is a breathtaking disaster waiting to happen. It is an absolute masterpiece of excess, yet it sits there gathering dust on the market, completely unwanted, with sweeping panoramic views of the Pacific Ocean and hand-carved stone arches that scream old money. This place feels less like your standard California beach pad and more like a Renaissance palazzo ripped straight out of Italy and dropped onto the Malibu coast. Step inside and you are hit with amenities that define the 1% lifestyle. We're talking a climate-controlled sanctuary for meditation, a professional-grade gym, and lush manicured grounds that only a true pop diva could dream up. But here is the kicker. Despite the jaw-dropping architecture and the fact that it is owned by the legendary Cher, this real estate gem has been an absolute nightmare to sell. The goddess of pop has slashed the price tag multiple times in a desperate bid to close the deal, but shifting market trends in 2026 and the home's incredibly specific Gothic-style customization seem to be scaring off billionaires. What used to be the ultimate status symbol in Malibu is now facing a harsh reality check as wealthy buyers pivot toward modern minimalism rather than ornate grandeur. For the moment, this architectural beast remains a heavy anchor in Cher's portfolio, a lingering symbol of a bygone era of glamour that ironically has become a white elephant in today's housing game. Whether some eccentric tycoon will finally sign the check or if it stands as a permanent monument to her extravagant taste remains the multi-million-dollar question. Then there is the dragon himself, Bruce Lee. His former residence in Hong Kong was supposed to be a Zen sanctuary for the martial arts pioneer, but today it stands as a heartbreaking, crumbling shell that casts a shadow over his monumental global impact. Tucked away in the Kowloon district, this modest two-story structure is hallowed ground. It is exactly where Lee spent his final quiet moments before the world lost him way too soon in 1973. While Lee is immortalised as a god of cinema and combat, his physical home tells a much darker, sadder story of total neglect and wasted opportunity. Despite decades of pleading from die-hard fans to turn the site into a proper museum honouring his life, every single plan to save the building has fallen flat on its face. Endless legal battles and a revolving door of property owners have left the house in a bizarre state of limbo, with the walls literally rotting away and its historical significance slowly fading into the background noise of the city. Still, loyal devotees make the pilgrimage to the gate, desperate to feel some connection to the legend. Right now, though, the house is just an abandoned ghost, a brutal contrast to the explosive energy and discipline Lee represented. Unless someone steps up with a serious restoration plan immediately, this tangible piece of martial arts history is going to be completely erased by the elements. Let's talk about Britney Spears. Her massive villa in Thousand Oaks was once the crown jewel of her portfolio, but today it stands as a faded symbol of her incredibly chaotic personal timeline. Situated in one of the most exclusive gated communities, this Italian-inspired fortress was supposed to be the ultimate display of wealth and success. It had everything: sprawling manicured lawns, a pool that looked like it belonged in a Las Vegas resort, and interiors that balanced classic elegance with that distinct pop star flair. Back in the day, this place was Britney's sanctuary, a high-security bunker shielding her from the flashing lights and relentless harassment of the paparazzi. But as the drama in her life spiraled out of control, the house seemed to suffer right along with her. Reports of neglect began to surface, mirroring the turbulence of the conservatorship era. The once pristine gardens started looking wild and overgrown, and the estate's shine began to dull, turning from a dream home into a burden. Despite the killer location and the A-list pedigree, the property became radioactive on the market. The insane upkeep costs, combined with the toxic history attached to the address, made it an incredibly tough sell for agents. Currently, the estate is stuck in real estate purgatory, a sad reminder that even the biggest icons in the world can watch their domestic dreams turn into nightmares when life gets messy. Then we have Lil Wayne. His Miami Beach mansion was the definition of a rapper's paradise, but it eventually turned into a financial headache that he couldn't shake off. Sitting on a prime slice of waterfront real estate, this multi-level beast was decked out with a private movie theatre, a gym that rivals professional sports facilities, and a pool deck overlooking the bay. It was built for a hip-hop mogul, a physical trophy of Wayne's chart-topping dominance. However, when he decided it was time to cash out, the mansion became an albatross around his neck, proving much harder to unload than anyone predicted. He initially listed it with a sky-high asking price, but buyers just weren't biting, leaving the property to sit stale on the listings for ages. Even while the rest of the Miami luxury market was on fire, Wayne's place was stagnant, forcing him to slash the price tag repeatedly just to get eyes on it. After years of stress, he finally sold the place, but he had to take a massive financial hit to do it. The saga of Lil Wayne's Miami crib teaches a harsh lesson about celebrity homes. Clout does not pay the mortgage. Even the most tricked-out expensive pads can sit empty for years, proving that in the cutthroat game of high-stakes real estate, timing and pricing mean way more than the name on the deed. Finally, look at David Gilmour. Hook End Manor used to be a buzzing epicenter of rock and roll history, but now it stands in total eerie silence. It is a tragic fall from grace for a place that once vibrated with the sounds of legends. Owned by Pink Floyd's guitarist, this massive estate, deep in the English countryside, wasn't just a place to sleep, it was a creative laboratory for some of the greatest music ever made. The on-site recording studio birthed iconic tracks, including sessions for the final cut, and saw heavyweights like Rod Stewart walk through its doors to lay down vocals. But despite having a pedigree that should belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the mansion's fate took a nosedive after changing hands a few times, eventually falling into total disrepair. By 2017, the studio that once hummed with amplifiers was completely abandoned, its soundproofed walls protecting nothing but dust and ghosts. Smashed windows, a jungle of weeds choking the garden, and peeling wallpaper now define the space, a stark contrast to its glory days, when rock royalty used these rooms to shape the soundtrack of the 20th century. Although there have been attempts to flip or restore the manor, Hook End Manor remains stuck in limbo, a haunting, decaying memorial to a golden age of music that is slowly being eaten away by time. Pablo Escobar, there are few estates on the planet that hold as much dark history as... Let's talk about the ultimate symbol of narco wealth, Hacienda Nápoles. This wasn't just a home, it was a fortress built on blood money by the notorious drug lord Pablo Escobar. We are talking about an estate that sprawled over thousands of acres, a grotesque mix of high-end luxury and pure unadulterated excess. This place famously had a private zoo stocked with illegal wildlife smuggled in from Africa, a full-on bullfighting arena, and a private runway large enough to launch his entire fleet of drug-running planes. It was the physical embodiment of his god complex, serving as both a military-style bunker and a party palace for a man who thought he was invincible. But when the law finally caught up with him and he was taken out, in 1993, the whole house of cards collapsed. The Colombian government stepped in and seized the massive property, but they basically just let it rot. Nature didn't waste any time clawing back the land. Vines and jungle growth slowly strangled the once glitzy mansions, turning the drug lord's paradise into a ghost town. It is honestly creepy. Seeing the skeletal remains of his reign, you have got crumbling walls, roofless buildings, and rusting machinery just rotting away in the tall grass. While they did turn a chunk of it into a weird Jurassic Park-style theme park for tourists, huge parts of the estate are still just sitting there, totally abandoned. It is frozen in time, a chilling, silent monument to a criminal empire that once held an entire country hostage. Talk about a grim legacy. Now let's pivot to tech royalty. Steve Jobs, his relationship with the historic Jackling House was just as messy and complicated as the man himself. The Jackling House wasn't just a mansion. It was a piece of California history designed by the legendary architect George Washington Smith back in the roaring 20s. It was a gorgeous Spanish colonial revival masterpiece tucked away in Woodside, California, oozing old money charm and craftsmanship. But when the Apple visionary bought it, in the 1980s, he realised he absolutely hated it. Instead of fixing it up, he let the place fall apart around him, treating a historic landmark like a teardown. He basically moved out and left the door open for the elements, determined to bulldoze it to the ground. This started a massive war with local preservationists who were screaming that he was destroying an architectural treasure. It turned into a bitter legal brawl that dragged on for years, pitting modern minimalism against history. For a long time, the house just sat there, rotting in legal limbo, a casualty of Jobs' obsession with starting fresh. He just would not budge on his vision. Finally, after winning the war of attrition, Jobs got his way. In 2011, the wrecking balls came in and flattened the place. Now nothing is left, except the heated arguments about whether it was right. It stands as one of those rare times where relentless innovation literally crushed the past in Jobs' biography. So you have to wonder, was the Apple founder right to destroy a piece of history just because it didn't fit his aesthetic? Or was it an ego trip? Drop a yes in the comments if you are Team Steve, or a no if you think he was wrong. Let's get a debate going down there. Then there is Michael Jackson. The infamous Neverland Ranch was once the king of pop's fairy tale escape, but today it feels more like a haunted house than a theme park. This massive California property spread across thousands of acres wasn't just a piece of real estate, it was a window into Jackson's mind. He built his own personal fantasy world, complete with a full-scale amusement park, a petting zoo and a theatre. It was supposed to be a safe haven. For a while, it represented his immense wealth and Peter Pan syndrome. But as the disturbing allegations and legal scandals started piling up, the magic of Neverland turned dark very quickly. After Jackson passed away in 2009, the estate became a toxic asset that nobody wanted to touch. Real estate agents tried everything. They stripped out the carnival rides and the train station, trying to make it look like a normal ranch to lure in billionaires. But the stigma was just too heavy. The price dropped and dropped again, sitting on the market for years while the paint peeled and the gardens grew wild. Eventually, billionaire Ron Burkle swooped in and bought it for pennies on the dollar, compared to its original asking price, a total steal for him. But let's be real, the sparkle is gone. The property is stuck in this weird limbo, stripped of the fantasy that made it famous. It stands now as a surreal, slightly depressing monument to the dizzying highs and terrifying lows of the most mysterious star in music history. Next up, we have tennis legend Boris Becker. his formerly glorious estate in Mallorca has become the poster child for financial disaster and public ruin. This Mediterranean palace was supposed to be the crown jewel of his career, featuring massive gardens, a crystal clear pool and million-dollar island views. It was the ultimate bachelor pad and family retreat, screaming success to anyone who saw it. But when Becker's finances hit the skids, the house took the hit too. As his money problems spiralled out of control, the mansion was left to rot under the Spanish sun. We are talking massive debts and shady legal issues, including heavy fines for illegal additions he built. His dream home turned into a financial nightmare. With no cash for upkeep, the place fell apart fast. Weeds choked out the landscaping and the luxury finishes started peeling away. It wasn't long before the banks came knocking. The property was foreclosed on, marking a humiliating rock bottom for the sports icon. What used to be a trophy home is now just a crumbling relic, a physical representation of the bad decisions that drained Becker's entire fortune. It is just sitting there in limbo, waiting for some brave investor to come along and pour millions into fixing a legend's broken house. Finally, let's look at the real estate headache shared by Alicia Keys and Swizz Beatz. They bought one of New Jersey's most famous compounds, which used to belong to comedy giant Eddie Murphy. This place was insane, huge grounds, a professional recording studio, indoor pool, and a private cinema. On paper, it looked like the ultimate power couple headquarters. It was designed for high-end parties and making hit records in total privacy. But when they decided to move on, they realised that a house this specific is a nightmare to sell. It turns out not everyone wants a celebrity fortress. Despite the A-list pedigree and the insane amenities, buyers were ghosting them. The mansion sat on the market, collecting dust, forcing them to slash the price multiple times. It sat there for years before finally selling, but at a significant discount, proving that sometimes a dream home is just a money pit. It ended up being a massive financial hit compared to the fortune Keys and Beatz originally dropped on the place. But honestly, their struggle just highlights a harsh truth about the ultra-luxury housing game. Even the glitziest, most hyped-up celebrity pads aren't bulletproof when the market decides to take a nosedive. Just because a house has hosted music royalty doesn't mean it will fly off the shelf. As we have seen time and again, star power alone isn't enough to secure a quick closing or a fat profit margin. Then there is the heartbreaking tale of Robin Williams' beloved estate in Napa Valley known as the Villa Sorriso, or House of Smiles. This sprawling property was built to be his ultimate safe haven, a personal fortress away from the chaotic noise of fame. Sitting on a massive stretch of land, the mansion was a testament to his incredible career, offering the kind of peace, quiet, and breathtaking scenery that you just can't find in Los Angeles. It was supposed to be the perfect hideaway for one of Hollywood's most beloved icons. A sanctuary where he could recharge and enjoy the solitude he desperately needed. But after the world lost Williams in 2014, that beautiful sanctuary took on a heavy, sombre atmosphere. Suddenly, the vineyards and infinity pools were overshadowed by tragedy, and prospective buyers couldn't just see the real estate, they felt the sorrow attached to it. That emotional stigma turned the listing into a ghost town. It sat there for what felt like forever, suffering through price slash after price slash as the market moved on without it. When the deal finally closed, the mansion went for pennies on the dollar compared to its true value, although the halls are silent now. The estate stands as a bittersweet legacy, a stunning home that serves as a quiet memorial to a genius we lost way too soon. Speaking of legends, let's talk about Tom Cruise and his fortress in Telluride. This wasn't just a vacation home, it was a rugged, private kingdom hidden deep in the Colorado mountains. Think Mission Impossible meets rustic luxury with jaw-dropping views and serious privacy. It was custom made for an adrenaline junkie who wanted to disappear. We are talking miles of trails for dirt bikes and horses, a total guy's paradise designed to lock out the paparazzi. It was the ultimate spot to decompress and escape the relentless glare of the Hollywood machine. But here is the thing about building a fortress in the middle of nowhere. It is really hard to find a buyer who wants to live that far off the grid. Cruise listed it with a sky-high price tag, assuming his A-list status would seal the deal. Spoiler alert, it didn't. He had to chop the price down multiple times over several years just to get a bite. The isolation that crews loved was a major deal breaker for everyone else, despite the incredible scenery and the celebrity pedigree attached to the deed. It eventually sold for way less than he wanted, proving that even Maverick can't outmaneuver a cold real estate market. His Telluride saga is a harsh lesson that even the most exclusive A-list properties are vulnerable to the brutal and unpredictable nature of the high-stakes housing industry. Now let's pivot to the enigma that is Kanye West. Before he went full minimalist with concrete bunkers, he owned a 3-story mansion in Los Angeles that screamed old-school luxury. This place is a total time capsule of old Kanye, standing in stark contrast to the brutalist architecture he became obsessed with later on. The home is dripping with ornate mouldings, crystal chandeliers, and fancy classical vibes that completely clashed with his evolving artistic vision. He bought it during a totally different era of his career, and as he changed the house, became an unwanted stepchild in his portfolio, leading to several failed attempts to offload it. It's actually kind of sad. The house is loaded with amenities like a private cinema, a state-of-the-art gym, and massive party spaces. Yet it sat stagnant because it didn't fit the brand anymore. Between the tricky location and the confused vibe, it became an outlier. That scared off the architectural snobs who preferred Ye's newer avant-garde tastes, even after slashing millions off the asking price. Buyers just weren't biting, leaving the property in a weird limbo. It's basically a real estate paradox. A mansion that is too expensive to tear down, but too specific for the average billionaire. We are still waiting to see if someone in 2026 rescues this relic and restores its bling era glory, or if it stays a dusty monument to a bygone era of hip-hop royalty. Then you have the grunge queen herself, Courtney Love. She bought a historic property out in the woods of Washington state, hoping it would be a zen retreat. But instead, it turned into another dramatic episode in her chaotic life. Tucked away in a dense forest, the house promised. The kind of silence you can't get in the city, which should have been perfect for a rock star. It was the complete opposite of the noise and madness that usually followed her around. Unfortunately, life got in the way and the maintenance stopped happening. What was once a charming cottage started to rot, literally falling apart at the seams. It went from a dream home to a spooky abandoned shell with crumbling walls that seemed to mirror the turbulence she was going through personally. Trying to sell it dragged on for years because every potential buyer took one look at the renovation costs and ran for the hills. In the end, she had no choice but to take a lowball offer just to get it off her hands. It's a cautionary tale that even wealthy celebrities can lose control of the very sanctuaries they bought to protect themselves. So here is a question for you guys. If you bought a dilapidated celebrity home like this, would you gut it for a modern look or try to save the vintage soul? Drop your renovation master plans in the comments below. I want to hear your takes. Moving on to the Sunshine State, Jason Derulo found out the hard way that Florida real estate can be just as savage as the music industry. His massive compound in Coconut Creek seemed to have it all, despite its sleek, modern design, expansive. Despite boasting a resort-style swimming pool and a top-tier private gym, the estate lingered in real estate purgatory way longer than anyone predicted. What everyone assumed would be a quick and easy deal spiraled into a grueling marathon, forcing Derulo to slash the asking price over and over again just to get a bite. He was desperate to lure in a buyer, but the funny thing is the mansion's inability to sell had absolutely nothing to do with it being run down or neglected. If anything, the place was too perfect. Sitting in one of the most cutthroat luxury markets in the country, it was going head-to-head with some insane competition from other mega mansions that were just as opulent. Buyers had their pick of brand new ultra-modern pads, which left Derulo's once hot property feeling a bit like yesterday's news. Even after chopping millions off the price tag, the estate is still sitting there collecting dust, serving as a pricey wake-up call that fame and fortune don't give you a free pass when the housing market turns cold. It remains to be seen if a savvy investor will finally recognise the value, or if this massive compound will keep standing empty as a monument to missed connections and bad timing. Now let's talk about 50 Cent. Clocking in at a staggering 50,000 square feet, 50 Cent's Connecticut compound wasn't just a crib. It was a literal temple to excess and ego. This place had a serious pedigree previously owned by boxing legend Mike Tyson. We are talking 21 bedrooms, multiple swimming pools, a licensed nightclub and a full-blown casino inside the house. When the hip-hop mogul snatched it up back in 2003, it was the perfect symbol of his meteoric rise to the top of the charts. But that dream home quickly turned into a financial nightmare. What looked like the ultimate flex transformed into a burden that was almost impossible to shake. Despite having amenities that rivaled a Las Vegas hotel, the property sat stagnant on the market for more than a decade. The sheer scale of the place, combined with maintenance bills that reportedly hit $70,000 every single month, made it a terrifying investment for even the wealthiest house hunters. Over the years, 50 Cent had to humble himself and drop the price tag repeatedly, practically begging for someone to take the keys off his hands. Finally, after 12 long years of waiting, the White Elephant sold in 2019 for just $2.9 million. That is a painful drop from his original asking price of $18.5 million, even though he finally closed the deal. This once glamorous palace is now remembered as a massive money pit and a lesson on why bigger isn't always better. Nicolas Cage. Then you have the homes that are just straight up cursed. Some properties have vibes so bad that no amount of Hollywood star power can fix them. Nicolas Cage found this out the hard way when he decided to buy the infamous LaLaurie Mansion in New Orleans. This isn't just an old house, it has a horrific legacy involving torture and death. It was once the lair of Madame Delphine LaLaurie, a woman known for pure evil. And today the building is widely regarded as one of the most haunted spots in the entire United States. Cage, being the eccentric guy he is, was drawn to that spooky energy and added it to his portfolio during a period where he was buying castles and dinosaur skulls left and right. But when the IRS came knocking and his finances tanked, Cage had to liquidate his assets, including this house of horrors. You would think a prime spot in the French Quarter with that much history would fly off the market, but the grim past made it radioactive to buyers. Between the ghost stories and the local legends about bad juju potential owners stayed far away, leaving the place in a weird real estate limbo. The dark cloud hanging over the mansion's history totally tanked its resale potential, and it is still an open question if the LaLaurie Mansion will ever find a soul brave or crazy enough to actually sleep there at night. Keith Richards. Sitting high above the street in a historic New York City tower, Keith Richards' penthouse was supposed to be the ultimate rock and roll sanctuary. It was a killer mix of old school pre-war elegance and modern swag, featuring marble floors, high ceilings, and views of the skyline that went on for days. On paper, it looked like the perfect bachelor pad for a billionaire. But despite the killer address and the undeniable cool factor, the Rolling Stones legend hit a brick wall when trying to sell it. Richard started with an ambitious price tag, assuming his name and the apartment's luxury would bring in the sharks. But the Manhattan market is ruthless and had other ideas. Buyers balked at the number he wanted, and even as Richard started lowering his expectations and the price, the listing just sat there. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the inventory. The New York luxury scene was absolutely flooded with high-end condos, making it tough for his classic penthouse to compete with the shiny new glass towers. After struggling for ages, Richards finally unloaded the place, but he had to eat a loss of nearly 7 figures to get the deal done. It just goes to show that even if you are a rock god, the harsh realities of the property market do not care who you are. Mohammed Hadid. While some mansions are known for being beautiful, others are famous for being total disasters. Mohammed Hadid's doomed Bel Air mega mansion, which he boasted would be a record-breaking estate, ended up being a masterclass in arrogance and failure. Built precariously on a hillside, the gigantic structure violated dozens of building codes, growing way bigger than allowed and terrifying everyone with safety hazards. As the walls went up, Furious neighbours launched a war against the project, claiming the unstable construction could slide down the hill and crush their homes. The drama turned into a massive lawsuit that was all over the news. Eventually, the hammer came down and the courts ruled against Hadid, actually ordering that parts of the mansion be torn down. It went from being a symbol of wealth to a symbol of overreach, turning one of Los Angeles' most prestigious projects into rubble. It serves as a massive blinking red flag to anyone paying attention. Even with an address that screams wealth, the dark cloud hanging over this project made unloading the mansion a total nightmare. Today, it's nothing more than a half-finished skeleton of what was supposed to be a dream home, standing there as a brutal reminder that no amount of cash allows developers to rewrite the rulebook or ignore the law. Then you have Elon Musk, who absolutely floored the public when he declared he was liquidating his entire property portfolio, including a legendary $37 million estate in California. The tech titan, famous for his obsession with getting humans to Mars, claimed that unshackling himself from physical assets was the only way to fully dedicate his brainpower to interplanetary colonization. But let's be real, even when you have billions in the bank, selling a piece of history like that isn't exactly a walk in the park. This massive compound, formerly the beloved home of the late comedy icon Gene Wilder, came with endless gardens, interiors fit for royalty, and views that would make you weep. It wasn't just a house, it was a status symbol representing the kind of massive success Musk had already achieved 10 times over. But his pivot to a nomadic, minimalist lifestyle meant the house had to go. Despite the prestige and the killer location, the mansion didn't exactly fly off the market, mostly because the asking price was eye-watering, even for the 1%. Musk finally handed over the keys to a private buyer in 2021, but he wasn't looking for a profit. This was all about proving a point. In classic Musk style, he turned a standard real estate transaction into a philosophical mic drop, showing the world that the richest man on earth could walk away from luxury without looking back. Switching gears to pop royalty, Madonna's Beverly Hills Palace was supposed to be the ultimate trophy home. We're talking about a sprawling estate with lush landscaping, a pool that rivals five-star resorts, and decor wild enough to suit the material girl herself. She bought it when she was ruling the charts, and the place was a physical manifestation of her global dominance, acting as both a private hideaway and a loud announcement of her fabulous wealth. But when it came time for Madonna to move on, she found out the hard way that offloading a mega mansion is a headache. Even with her legendary fame and the property's prime zip code, the house sat there gathering dust in a fiercely competitive game. Beverly Hills is absolutely swimming in luxury listings, so even a house with Madonna's name on the deed struggled to grab attention. She had to slash the price multiple times, but the ultra-wealthy buyers were playing it cool, refusing to overpay just for celebrity history in a market that was already flooded with options. After languishing in real estate purgatory for years, the place finally sold, but for way less cash than the Queen of Pop had originally demanded. It just goes to show that the real estate game is brutal and doesn't care about your Grammy's prestige alone. Won't close the deal if the numbers don't add up. Mark White, a heavy hitter in the music production world, thought he'd scored the deal of a lifetime when he picked up a massive mansion dripping with old school character. The place looked like a masterpiece with grand architectural details and a deep history that screamed luxury living. But as the saying goes, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. Hidden under the marble and gold was a tragic backstory that no amount of money could wash away. Long before White signed the papers, a horrific accident on the grounds had stained the property's reputation permanently. Dark rumours and whispers of a curse seemed to dog every single owner who tried to call the place home. White was convinced he could break the bad luck streak, pouring a fortune into renovations to try and exorcise the gloom and dazzle a new generation of buyers. But despite polishing the place until it shined, the stigma stuck like glue. Potential buyers were totally creeped out by the property's grim vibes, and the mansion stayed on the market unwanted. In high-end real estate, there are some scars you just can't cover up with fresh drywall and expensive landscaping. Then there's the wild saga of Tommy Lee's Calabasas pad, which was anything but cookie cutter. It was a total rock star fantasy decked out with gothic decor, a moody indoor pool, and a custom studio space that perfectly matched his chaotic, larger-than-life energy. The house had a dark, theatrical atmosphere that made it completely different from the beige, safe mansions surrounding it, but that bold style came with some serious baggage and whispers of something, supernatural. Word on the street was that the place was haunted, which added a layer of spookiness to a design that was already pretty intense. Whether it was just stories fueled by Lee's wild partying days or actual paranormal activity, the gossip absolutely destroyed the home's curb appeal. Despite being owned by a rock legend, the house was a hard sell because its vampire chic aesthetic and creepy reputation scared off the mainstream crowd. Lee eventually managed to unload the property, but he had to take a major haircut, dropping the price significantly to get it sold. The whole ordeal proved that even the coolest, most extravagant cribs can become giant financial burdens if they are too weird, too dark, or rumoured to come with roommates from the afterlife. And finally, we have Birdman, once the flashy king of hip-hop excess. Birdman's now abandoned New Orleans mansion is a rotting monument to the fury of Mother Nature. Located in a seriously upscale area, that this palace was supposed to show everyone how far the Cash Money rapper had climbed. But when Hurricane Katrina slammed into the city in 2005, the estate was absolutely wrecked by the flooding, the wind, and the chaos that drowned the city. Even with Birdman's deep pockets, the destruction was just too massive to fix, forcing him to walk away. He basically ghosted the property, walking away and leaving it to rot completely. As the years rolled by, the mansion's condition went from bad to worse, with walls crumbling down and black mould taking over. The rotting interiors and the wildly overgrown yards have turned this once massive estate into a sad, decaying shadow of the glory it used to hold. While other neighbourhoods in New Orleans managed to pick up the pieces and rebuild, this mansion is stuck in a time warp, a total casualty of both the disaster and years of apathy. Every single attempt to fix it up or put it on the market has hit a dead end, leaving the place stuck in legal limbo. The big question is, will anyone step up to handle the massive headache of bringing this place back to life, or is it destined to remain a forgotten piece of history? Then there is the dark legend of Aleister Crowley. There are very few homes in the world that are as wrapped in terror and mystery as the Boleskine house. It is a truly haunting piece of real estate. It sits high up, overlooking the murky waters of Loch Ness. This place was once the home of the infamous occultist Aleister Crowley, and the mansion has been covered in dark myths for decades. Crowley's alleged black magic rituals and wild experiments back in the early 1900s started all the rumours. People talk about supernatural forces that just won't leave the building. Even long after he died, the next owners kept reporting freakish events, all of which just cemented its spooky reputation. Over the decades, Boleskine House was sold over and over again, but nobody could seem to get rid of that heavy, unsettling vibe. Then tragedy really hit when a massive fire absolutely destroyed most of the property. It left behind almost nothing but a burnt-out skeleton. Even though people have tried to save the mansion since then, its deep connection to the occult and dark arts continues to kill its resale value, now with its ruined remains standing there. Stark and creepy against the Scottish backdrop, we have to ask, is Boleskine House actually cursed, or is it just a victim of its own twisted history? Now let's pivot to a major shocker. Just 2 weeks before he passed away, Gene Hackman broke his silence to drop a secret that has the potential to rock Hollywood to its foundation. What exactly did he know? What kind of heavy truth was he lugging around all those years buried under? All that fame and fortune, Hackman was not just an actor on a screen. He was a guy who stared directly into the dark underbelly of the industry. And before he checked out of this world, he made the choice to speak up. But is anybody listening? And the bigger question is, who has the guts to actually face the reality? This is the narrative Hackman didn't want hidden anymore. 6 burning questions, like 6 knives driven straight into the heart of the truth, hidden behind the perfect facade of a peaceful goodbye. But let's be real, no exit is peaceful when the hand of the unseen powers is still messing with the pieces that never quite fit together. Amidst those final breaths that nobody really heard. Even though Gene Hackman is gone, these 6 questions are still hanging in the air, demanding answers. The golden boy, from the flashing lights of the red carpet to the exclusive late-night Oscar after-parties, Gene Hackman once had the keys to the kingdom, enjoying every perk of an A-list celebrity. He was a 2-time winner of that golden trophy everyone wants. Hackman was one of the rare ones who climbed to the very top without selling his soul to the shady forces running Hollywood. However, behind that movie star smile was a guy who just wanted to be alone. He slammed the door on the glitzy invites and the industry games, rejecting everything that other people called success. By the late 1980s, right when his career hit its absolute peak with movies like Mississippi Burning and Unforgiven, Hackman started backing out of the limelight. The trophies, the praise and the champagne, toasts with famous co-stars just became useless noise that Hackman didn't care about. He felt Hollywood had zero loyalty and zero conscience, driven only by a bottomless greed for money. This harsh take wasn't just some random throwaway comment. It was the result of everything he had seen, felt and absorbed over decades of dealing with the blinding glare of the cameras and the dirty politics happening behind closed doors. Hackman wasn't built to be a superstar. He openly admitted that standing on stage, accepting awards, made him sick to his stomach. The pats on the back, the fake smiles near, the velvet curtains and the congratulations that were immediately followed by secret backstabbing, all of it made Hackman feel totally disgusted. Hackman once spilled the tea to a close friend about a moment right after winning his first Oscar for The French Connection. He ripped off his bow tie and literally threw it into a trash can inside the men's room at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion. That wasn't just a moment of frustration. It was the boiling point of years of disappointment, starting from the day Hackman first stepped into the business. He showed up with a simple dream of acting. As he put it, "I didn't come here for the fame, I came here to do a job." But Hackman quickly realised that Tinseltown was not a place that cared about passion. Instead, the machine existed just to chew up and spit out anyone brave enough to care about art or fairness. For a long time, he was a massive headache for the hidden powers in the industry. Hackman turned down huge paychecks, said no to the fancy fundraising galas, and even bluntly refused to join the Academy's voting board. To him, Hollywood was just one giant trap where desperate people would stab each other in the back just to stay relevant for 5 more minutes. Because of that, Hackman took the road less travelled, cutting every cord to the power players and shutting himself off. Far removed from the flashing cameras and prying eyes of the media, Gene Hackman vanished into the dusty, quiet landscapes of New Mexico. He sought refuge in a reclusive existence alongside his wife, Betsy Arakawa, the one woman whose faith in his decent heart never wavered, even when the world thought otherwise. Even as Hackman tried to take a pair of shears to the ties binding him to the industry, attempting to sever every last lifeline to the movie business, but Tinseltown refused to let its legendary star fade into the sunset. The shadow of Hollywood stretched all the way to Santa Fe. Famous directors kept calling, and screenplays mysteriously appeared on his porch, despite his address being a closely guarded secret. Every script was like a ghost from a past life, haunting his new reality. It was a nagging reminder that escaping the beast of show business is harder than escaping Alcatraz. But the thing that really kept him up at night wasn't the fame. It was the tormenting burden that had been simmering and scorching the pit of his stomach for decades. It was the heavy weight of the truths he had been forced to keep under lock and key. We are talking about the dark stuff, revelations about secret meetings in smoke-filled rooms, backroom handshakes between studio kingpins, and desperate young actors willing to trade their dignity and sacrifice everything for a single shot at the red carpet. Hackman saw it all. He knew where the bodies were buried, and he loathed himself for biting his tongue all those years. So as he faced the twilight of his life, when the crushing chest pains made the concept of mortality all too real, Hackman finally decided enough was enough. He shattered the silence that he had held firm for nearly 50 years. What he spilled wasn't just tea. It was the first piece of a horrifying puzzle that exposes the rot at the core of the Dream Factory. He had been watching. Gene Hackman broke his lifelong oath and dropped a bombshell secret about the industry right as he faced the end of his journey. Go ahead and type the number 1 in the comments if you are ready for the truth, and stick around because you are not going to want to miss this deep dive. Whispers in the studio. Now let's get into the weeds. Despite playing hardened, cool-headed characters on the big screen, the real Gene Hackman was a powder keg waiting for a match. He was quick to blow his top whenever he ran into something that rubbed him the wrong way. And that legendary intensity first boiled over most fiercely back on the gritty set of The French Connection way back in 1971. This was when Hackman stepped into the shoes of Jimmy Popeye Doyle, the role that would turn him into an absolute icon. Nobody guessed that the raw, nervous energy you saw on the screen wasn't just acting, it was real. It came from a toxic atmosphere of pure friction. Between the lead star and the brass running the show, director William Friedkin, a true heavyweight in the business, was steering the ship. But working under Friedkin was like surviving a boot camp. His directing style was essentially psychological warfare for anyone who pushed back against his methods. Known for his brutal and uncompromising approach to filmmaking, he pushed his actors to the brink of physical and mental collapse just to get that one perfect, authentic take. But for Hackman, the stress wasn't just coming from a demanding boss. It was compounded by an unseen, sinister force lurking in the shadows of the production. From day one, Hackman felt like he was being watched, and not just by the camera lens. He felt eyes on him that didn't belong to the crew. He started getting strange phone calls and suggestive propositions from suits he had never met. These weren't agents or casting directors. They didn't want to talk about his craft, the script, or art. Instead, they laid out specific terms. You scratch our backs, we make you a star. They offered unseen backing in exchange for favours, which Hackman later called the filth behind the curtain. One night, after a grueling shoot that left the whole team running on fumes, Hackman stepped out backstage to catch his breath. He found a dark corner outside the soundstage, lit only by the sickly yellow glow of streetlights, hoping for quiet. Instead, he stumbled upon a hushed conversation. He accidentally overheard a producer whispering with a voice he didn't recognise. The words were drifting through the cigarette smoke, but Hackman heard enough to freeze his blood. They were talking about him like he was livestock. This role, the awards, his future. We control the trajectory. He doesn't need to understand how the machine works, the voice said. We need fresh meat, but someone we can keep on a leash. The icy lack of humanity in that voice sent a shiver straight down Hackman's spine. The frustration he had been bottling up finally detonated. The next morning, Hackman marched in and got right in Friedkin's face, confronting the producer too, but all he got in return were faint, condescending smiles and defiant stares. That was the moment the penny dropped for Gene. He realised that Hollywood actors are just pawns on a chessboard played by invisible masters. The footage they shot wasn't just for the audience. It served the hidden agendas of the power players. From that day on, Hackman drew a line in the sand. He refused to engage in private meetings, with producers steering clear of those exclusive after-parties where the champagne flowed and shady deals were disguised as friendly networking. He knew that walking into those rooms might boost his career, but the price tag was his soul, and that was a price he wasn't willing to pay. Not many people knew that Hackman actually turned down starring roles in at least 3 massive blockbusters in the 1970s. Every single one of them would go on to win Oscars. Yet he rejected all of them, not because the scripts were bad, but because each offer came with a laundry list of non-artistic demands. We're talking private dinners with power players, vague contracts with uncertain terms about personal image, promotions, and most infuriating of all, unspoken expectations. Requests that Hackman found so disgusting he would literally shred the script the second he finished reading the fine print. There has been a persistent rumour circulating in the industry underground for years. One Hackman never officially confirmed, but never denied. It suggested that he had stumbled upon proof of a secret pact to rig and manipulate the Academy Awards. Allegedly, a top-tier producer cut a quiet deal with an Academy insider. It wasn't about the quality of the film, it was about the media exposure package sold after the ceremony. After seeing how the sausage was made, Hackman lost all respect for the Oscar campaigns. To him, that golden statue wasn't a symbol of artistic greatness anymore. It was just a receipt for a shady handshake made in a dark room. As those whispers echoed through the studio lots night after night that year, Hackman came to a hard realisation he didn't want to play the game anymore. He no longer had a sanctuary in this modern existence. It all began with a confession from the man they called the Oath Breaker, tucked away in a quiet room along the rugged Santa Fe coastline. This was the retreat where Gene Hackman had sought peace in his twilight years, far removed from the noise and madness of the industry. But the silence was shattered in the dead of night by the ringing of an old landline. On the other end was a voice anchored in decades of shared history, a confidant who remained perhaps the only person alive Hackman still trusted enough to burden with the skeletons in his closet. These were truths he had kept under lock and key since he was a young man in Hollywood. However, this wasn't a social call to swap war stories or laugh about the golden days. Hackman was calling to unburden his soul, and his voice was gravely worn down by time and guilt. Every syllable landed like a physical blow to the listener. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He opened with a statement as chilling as the desert wind creeping through a cracked window. We traded our souls for a spot on the marquee, and I refused to take this weight to the grave. Outside the New Mexico sky was a void of ink-black darkness, but the shadows gathering inside the room were far heavier. The lamps were cold, and the customary tumbler of scotch was missing from the side table. Instead, there was only the crushing weight of memories he had tried to bury for over 50 years, now rising like a tidal wave. When Hackman spoke, it was slow and deliberate, as if he were dragging heavy stones up a hill with every sentence. He painted a picture of a night back in 1974 set against the backdrop of a sprawling Beverly Hills estate where the guest list wasn't just movie stars, but a roll call of titans from production studios, media empires and political offices. But this wasn't just a party. It was Hackman's initiation into what he called the Inner Circle, a clandestine fraternity of screen legends adored by the public. Yet shackled by secrets, they were forbidden to whisper once the cameras stopped rolling. The Inner Circle, as Hackman described it, wasn't some Illuminati-style cult with robes and blood oaths. It was far more practical and sinister. It was a silent pact among those who had seen the rot at the core of the industry. They were survivors on a lifeboat, aware of exactly why the ship went down, but sworn to silence to keep their own heads above water. They protected the truth to protect their livelihoods. The heaviest stone Hackman carried, the one that had been eating away at his conscience like rust every single day, was the cover-up of Hollywood's most depraved secret predation ring, targeting the vulnerable, specifically children, orchestrated by renowned filmmakers, celebrated actors and powerful figures who handed out awards and decided who appeared on the news. By 1975, Hackman and a group of other actors' names that have since faded from the limelight were summoned to a private mixer. They thought it was a career move, a chance to rub elbows with the kingmakers. But what waited behind those heavy oak doors would haunt Hackman's nightmares until his dying breath. He described a red velvet curtain pulled back to reveal a scene of absolute horror where children, too innocent to understand their plight, were served up as entertainment for self-proclaimed moguls. The sound of applause, the sickening laughter, and the backroom handshakes that sealed these deals were burned into his retinas, chilling him to the bone like an icy phantom. The morning after the hangover wasn't from alcohol, it was from terror. Hackman and his peers, none of whom ever expected to walk into such a nightmare, were corralled into a secluded office. The ultimatum was simple and brutal. Sign a non-disclosure agreement to guarantee leading roles and protection, or open your mouth and watch your life and career disintegrate into nothingness. Hackman put pen to paper. He didn't do it for the fame. He did it because he knew that throwing a pebble at a tank fueled by that much money and power was suicide. That signature was more than a confession. It was the tolling of a bell signalling his descent into an abyss where the industry's darkest sins were kept safe. If this story is gripping you, hit that like button and make sure you are subscribed for more deep dives. Even if you hate it, a like helps the algorithm. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your feedback keeps this investigation alive. Now let's talk about the missing tapes. When the news broke that Gene Hackman had passed his modest adobe home in Santa Fe, immediately became ground zero. But the first arrivals weren't grieving fans or local reporters. It was the specific cleanup crew figures who operate in the shadows, who descended on the property before the body was even cold. They didn't come with wreaths or condolences. They were tearing the place apart, looking for one thing, the tapes. Among the old guard of Hollywood, these recordings were whispered about as if they were urban legends. Those in Hackman's inner orbit knew the truth. He'd been wired for decades, not for blackmail or leverage, but simply to preserve his sanity and create an insurance policy in case the truth ever needed to see the light of day. Hackman called them the lifeline tapes, the only thread connecting him to his own morality. According to a deep cover source, this clandestine archiving project began in earnest during the late 1980s. Everything was captured on magnetic tape late-night demands from producers, veiled threats against starlets who wouldn't play ball, and even candid unlogged conversations between the town's power brokers. Each cassette was a puzzle piece, a segment of what Hackman described as the most grotesque mosaic of corruption he had ever seen. These weren't just random audio clips. They were the smoking gun, undeniable proof of a predatory system that had been operating with impunity for generations. Let's talk about the dark underbelly of Tinseltown. For decades, those golden statues weren't just about acting chops. They were currency in a much dirtier game where careers were snuffed out like candles just for saying no. Fresh-faced kids off the bus were silenced and compromised before they even learned their blocking marks or got their first union card, forced into silence to protect the elite. Gene Hackman dropped a bomb to a buddy once, swearing that if the public actually knew what he knew, the ratings for the Academy Awards would drop to absolute zero overnight. But now that the legend has passed on, the smoking gun has gone missing too. Following a frantic plea from the estate, the Santa Fe police didn't just knock on the door, they tore the place apart looking for answers. We are talking about a top-to-bottom sweep. Officers were prying open false bottoms in desk drawers, tapping on bookshelves for hollow sounds, and checking for hidden wall safes throughout the property. They practically pulled up the floorboards, but the result was a whole lot of nothing. No cassettes, no digital backups, not even an empty reel case. The evidence had evaporated into the desert air. This wasn't just a rumour, though. Hackman's cousin, who lived a stone's throw away for the last 10 years, swore on a stack of Bibles that those recordings existed stashed away in a beat-up vintage leather traveller's bag. The family member described seeing the old-school tape boxes packed tight, almost like a doomsday kit, sitting there gathering dust, but ready to blow the lid off the industry at a moment's notice. Gene never sat anyone down to explain exactly who was on those recordings, but his orders were crystal clear. If he kicked the bucket, that bag was strictly off-limits to the family. Instead, they were given a specific name, a ghost of a man, an old associate who stayed so far off the grid he never even popped up in a single paparazzi shot or red carpet roll. But here is the kicker: when law enforcement finally cracked the seal on that storage room, the leather bag had walked. Gone. Cleaned out without so much as a fingerprint left behind. Somebody got to it first, which begs the terrifying question: who beat the cops to the scene? And more importantly, was Gene smart enough to make duplicates of the damning evidence? If backups exist, where in the world are they stashed? Is there a disillusioned producer sitting on them, or maybe an old co-star who hated the system just as much as Gene did? Maybe they are collecting dust in a high-security deposit box managed by some shark attorney in downtown Manhattan, shielded by attorney-client privilege until the check clears. Or worst case scenario for the elite, they were mailed to an investigative journalist who is currently sitting on the story of the century, just waiting for the legal clear to hit publish. Deep in the Hollywood Hills, insiders are whispering that Hackman was not the lone wolf on this. There is a silent circle of directors and writers who know exactly what was on those reels. Even some of the younger talent trapped in compromised positions and predatory contracts have heard the rumours. But you will never hear them speak a word of it on the record. They know the rules of the game. Talking about the missing Hackman tapes is a one-way ticket to blacklisting, or worse, a tragic accident on the highway. As the sun sets over the Santa Fe desert, leaving the streets empty, we are left with nothing but chilling questions hanging in the dark like smoke. How much of the ugly truth did Hackman actually manage to document before he died? And who exactly holds the power to decide if those skeletons stay in the closet forever? Back in Los Angeles, the industry continues its masquerade partying as if the sword of Damocles isn't hanging over their heads, shielded by a wall of pervasive silence. But the people who really knew Gene, the ones who saw the fire in his eyes, they know those tapes didn't just disappear into the ether. They are out there, hidden in the shadows, ticking like a time bomb, just waiting for a hero or a martyr brave enough to light the fuse. Call it the curse of the exile. The second Hackman walked off his final set. He didn't just retire, he went rogue, choosing a path of isolation that most fame-hungry stars would consider a death sentence. He traded the paparazzi of Beverly Hills for the dry heat and vast skies of Santa Fe, New Mexico. It became his fortress of solitude, a place where he could finally hear himself think. Astonishingly, he didn't live in a fortress. There were no 10-foot walls, no armed guards at the gate, just a modest wooden home exposed to the elements. The only soundtrack was the wind howling through the floorboards, a stark contrast to the constant chatter of the industry he left behind. He craved that silence like a drug. But even thousands of miles away in the desert, the long arm of the studio system never really let go of his collar. You can check out of Hollywood, but Hollywood never checks out of you. Hackman dropped that chilling line during a hushed conversation with confidants back in 2005. That statement wasn't just complaints from a grumpy old man. It morphed into a haunting prophecy that stalked him until his final days. A friend present that night remembers Hackman's voice being steady, but his eyes betrayed a deep, simmering terror. It was the look of a man who knew where all the bodies were buried. That is the burden of carrying forbidden secrets. In the beginning, when he first landed in New Mexico, he tried to keep a toe in the water, chatting with peers who still had some artistic integrity. He kept in touch with the few folks left who actually cared about the craft of acting rather than the politics of fame and leverage. But slowly, systematically, those bridges were burned. The phone stopped ringing. The line went dead. The isolation became absolute. Handwritten notes were sent out into the void with no reply. Whether it was paranoia or protection, Hackman retreated into a shell so hard that no one could crack it. He used to joke to his family, "If I just disappeared into thin air tomorrow, nobody would even blink." But looking back, nobody is laughing now. It feels less like a joke and more like a warning. After the funeral, that same cousin started spilling the tea on some truly creeping occurrences that plagued Hackman's final years. We are talking about strange sedans with tinted windows parked just down the road, engines idling all night long, watching the house like hawks without anyone ever getting out. Then there were the phone calls at 3 a.m. No voice, no message, just the eerie sound of slow rhythmic breathing before the click. And the mail was even worse. Anonymous envelopes showing up with zero return address containing a single slip of paper with 3 terrifying words scrawled on it. "We see you." Hackman never went to the press about the stalking, but his family knew he wasn't oblivious. He was hyper aware that the wolves were circling. In fact, he was so spooked that he lived out of a go bag. There were always 2 suitcases packed by the door, one with clothes and one with those explosive documents. Imagine living like a fugitive in your own living room, boots laced up, ready to run out the back door and leave your entire life behind at the drop of a hat. That is the price of the truth he was holding. It is why, as he got older, he slammed the door in the face of the industry that made him. He rejected every single olive branch, no honorary statues, no lifetime achievement galas, nothing. He wanted absolutely no part of their fake applause. He refused to show his face at a single tribute gala or lifetime achievement ceremony. Sure, part of that was his absolute disgust for the fake smiles and two-faced hypocrisy that runs Hollywood, but the real reason was much darker. He understood something the public didn't the second he stepped 1 foot outside his fortified sanctuary in Santa Fe. The ancient power brokers of the industry would be waiting. They would reach out with their long, invisible arms, ready to squeeze the last breath right out of his lungs. The tabloids and outsiders loved to label him as a paranoid recluse, but the few loyal souls who actually spent evenings inside that rustic wooden cabin knew the truth. They sat there captivated and horrified, listening to his jagged whispered tales about what really went down at those exclusive Beverly Hills after parties. He spoke of the illicit handshakes made in smoke-filled back rooms, and he wept for the bright-eyed young starlets whose lights were snuffed out before they ever got a chance to shine. Anyone who heard these confessions knew Hackman wasn't losing his mind or suffering from delusions. He was simply the last man standing, one of the only survivors who had lived long enough to see where all the bodies were buried. But the burning question that haunted everyone was simple. Did those explosive secrets escape his lips in time to matter? Or did those terrifying truths sink with him into the abyss of eternal silence that, my friends, was the final nail in the coffin of a legacy shrouded in mystery? Let's be clear, Gene Hackman's final days were miles away from the idyllic, peaceful retirement of an aging cinema legend enjoying his golden years. Far from it. His reality was drenched in a suffocating, thick tension, as if the air itself was being slowly sucked out of the room. Every morning brought a new wave of dread, as if the rising sun was being blocked out by the looming shadows of traumatic memories he simply couldn't scrub from his mind. About 3 weeks before the news broke of his passing, Hackman's cousin noticed a disturbing change in his behaviour. Gene, who had spent years aggressively cutting every cord that tied him to the Hollywood machine, was suddenly glued to his telephone. He was making call after call, frantically dialing out, but he wasn't reaching out to his former co-stars or the reporters who used to stalk his driveway. No, he was trying to contact a very specific, hand-picked list of individuals who were bound by a blood oath to a clandestine circle of silence, a pact that Hackman had smashed to pieces years ago when he walked away. These were once his allies, but when he tried to find them, he realised most of these shadowy figures had been completely wiped off the map. They hadn't just faded from memory, they had been erased from existence. And here is the most chilling part: every single one of them had met their end under highly suspicious circumstances. We are talking about solo car wrecks on empty roads in the middle of the night, unexplained fatal tumbles down grand staircases, or sudden heart attacks inside fortress-like mansions in Beverly Hills. The police reports always stamped them as tragic accidents, but Hackman wasn't buying it. He never believed in coincidences, not in a town where human souls are used as currency to buy fame. I have absolutely no one left to talk to. Hackman was heard murmuring to himself as he stood paralysed by his office window, his grip trembling on the receiver of his old-fashioned landline. He dialed and dialed, but the calls went unanswered, spiralling into the void. His voicemails were never returned, and the familiar voices he was desperate to hear had been silenced for good. After the news of Hackman's passing hit the wires, investigators found a disturbing collection of loose notes hidden deep inside his desk drawer. They were scrawled in a frantic, shaky script looking like the work of a man running out of time. Jagged sentence fragments with no clear beginning or end, resembling the hastily assembled shards of a nightmare puzzle that no one was meant to solve. Buried among the pile, scrawled on a crumpled scrap of yellow paper, was a single haunting sentence: the same faces, the same hands, the same silence. That specific phrase, repeated like a ghostly refrain throughout his writings, popping up in various notes, as if Gene was trying to carve a warning message for anyone brave enough to crack the code. The same faces referred to the ones flashing million-dollar smiles next to him on the red carpet, the very same people who were secretly destroying careers and crushing the spirits of anyone who threatened to spill the beans. The same hands that patted him on the back during the Oscars were the exact same hands signing the executive orders to erase inconvenient witnesses from history, and the same silence. A heavy, suffocating silence that had held strong for over 50 years was the shield protecting Hollywood's darkest, most sinister secrets. In this world, power wasn't measured just by box office numbers or net worth, but by the terrifying ability to dictate who lives and who dies. When the world learned of Gene Hackman's death, the official narrative was suspiciously simple natural causes. A neat, tidy, unblemished conclusion wrapped in a bow, leaving zero loose ends for any inquisitive reporters to pull at. But for those of us who know the dark underbelly of the world Hackman fled, the word natural is a concept that simply does not exist. So was this really the end of the road, or was it the industry's ultimate warning shot to anyone else thinking about defying the established order? One of his few surviving friends, a true insider, spoke to the press in hushed tones after the funeral. He said Gene knew the rules better than anyone. He understood the game, and he knew exactly what happens when you conveniently forget who actually writes the rulebook in this town. The saga of Gene Hackman doesn't wrap up with a peaceful plot in a Santa Fe cemetery. It ends with the slam of an office door behind the first officer, who walked into that timber home with a dead landline phone sitting off the hook by the window. And with that final chilling scrap of paper found tucked beneath the drawer lining, I was never meant to leave alive. Gene Hackman may have closed his eyes for the last time, but those final words linger in the air. They aren't a soft goodbye. They are a deafening scream ripping right through the glittering, gold-plated facade Hollywood built to hide its rotting, decaying conscience. That secret, who actually dared to listen to it. His final message wasn't just the rambling of a dying man. It was the testimony of a tormented soul who saw too much. He lived a life bathed in glory and applause, yet it was scarred by deep regret and sorrow. He gave his life to the art of cinema, but the price tag was steep, paid in invisible wounds and personal losses along the way. In those final moments, he physically could not stay silent any longer. He had to speak the truth, even if that radioactive truth had the power to shatter the very foundations of the entertainment world. For those of us left behind, the question is, do we have the guts to face that reality? Do we dare to listen to his warning all the way to the end, or will we choose to turn a blind eye, plug our ears, and keep living in a fantasy world of movie magic and falsehoods? Gene Hackman might be gone, but his words remain as a burning warning, a final challenge, and perhaps the only key we have to unlocking the future of a corrupt industry. These decaying palaces serve as a harsh wake-up call, proving that endless bank accounts and A-list status are powerless against the crushing weight of time and neglect. It is terrifying to think that even the most extravagant estates can be tossed aside like yesterday's trash, reminding us that being the hottest thing in Hollywood is often just a temporary gig. What is the real lesson hiding behind these broken gates and overgrown driveways? It might just be that the glittering promise of eternal success is actually a fragile lie. Furthermore, it shows that pouring millions into a dream home can sometimes turn into a financial nightmare. If you got a kick out of exploring these tragic ruins with us, do me a huge favour and hit that like button. And make sure you are subscribed to the channel with notifications turned all the way on so you never miss out on the tea. Also, if you skipped our last deep dive, do yourself a favour and click on that one next, because you seriously do not want to be out of the loop. It is filled with the kind of shocking revelations and insider dirt that you have to see to believe.